Never gets old. Never gets old.
Wow, that was quite the intro. I felt like Michael Jordan walking out of the court.
Oh my God. Welcome to Seven Kinds of Mischief. I'm your host, Stone Loki, and with me today is, of course, my co-host, Adega Outlaw, but also we have a very special guest here tonight, and that is PJ from Orville Nation. Welcome, PJ, to Seven Kinds of Mischief. How are you doing, my friend?
Thank you for the invite, guys.
Oh, needed your help for this one. Definitely brought you in. Hello to everybody out. I don't know, Blood Gully Gaming. Is this? I'm sorry, never met you before, but hello and welcome.
Welcome, everybody. I hope you guys are having a great night. The weekend is almost here. We're almost to Friday. That way everybody can de-stress over the weekend and take a break, but we're not quite there yet. And it is time for Seven Kinds of Mischief. Good evening, Blood Guilty Gaming. How are you doing? Darth Arlena says, hail Valhalla. Good evening, Darth Arlena. Maria with T and Telly says, hey. What is up, Maria with T and Telly? Good evening, Luis Sparrow. Good evening, Luis. How are you doing? Lady Mist, the Guardian of the Void. Lady Mist. Have we ever told PJ how she became the Guardian of the Void?
I don't know. It's a funny
PJ.
Story. Yeah,
I don't think so.
There was this issue with iPhones and YouTube, and I was a wrench on another channel. And Lady Mist sent in a super chat for $5. And when I clicked it, it blocked her from the channel. It kicked her off of the channel. Right after she sent a super chat, it kicked her off the channel. And I had to play hell trying to get her back on that channel because it kicked her into the void. So now she is the Guardian of the Void and waits in the void for anyone else that
she is the gatekeeper.
Secrets. The gatekeeper of the void. So when anybody gets sent in, she'd be like, okay, this is the exit. Loki apologizes for kicking you. That's why I decided to never be a wrench on my phone ever again. I felt so horrible about what happened. DJ Ronnie G, good evening. How are you doing? Papa Cotton, hell, how are you doing? Mi bonita perritos. Yes. Hola, mi bonita perritos.
I still want to call him Lord of all Wookiee, but oh well. He's
so good evening, guys. What the heck are we here for? What are we doing tonight, Adega? What are we doing?
Well, I wanted to get into, because there's a lot of things going on in the world today, and I wanted to present one aspect of it, and I wanted to bring in an expert. Plus, one of the benefits of having PJ, not only is he quite knowledgeable when it comes to all things psychology, has a lot of experience, but also more so than me, because a lot of you know that I always try and bring a little light to the subject and help people feel good about things and look to the good side of things. He is far better at it, or at least more consistent at it than I am, and I wanted to make sure he was here when we covered this subject. And he was kind enough to join us, so thank you very much, PJ.
Well, it sounds more like you're trying to say like PJ is just pathologically optimistic. That's
There's some truth to that. I don't have a problem actually claiming that, but
I would agree. I would agree with that.
See, you're outvoted here on that one. So, and Maria agrees as well. See, you are the optimist. But what I wanted to get into is, besides having a dog barking in the background, sorry, there is an assault. A lot of people will say to a very high degree. Some people say it's limited to certain circles on children. And so I wanted to kind of get into some of the psychology of it and see how it can possibly be affecting our children, things that we're going to have to face in the future. So, and I blew Chris Persia's mind away. He thought I was calling him a clown this morning because I sent him a picture of a blow-up clown doll. And PJ and I both experienced these when we were young to some degree. I know we had one. They were like you guys have heard of those Weebles where they would stand. It was a blow-up doll that stood about 2.5 feet tall, maybe 3 feet. And it was like a punching bag that would wobble, and it wasn't very heavy. Kids could pick it up, throw it around, or do whatever with it. But back in the early 60s, there was an experiment that was done, and it was called the Bobo doll experiment. And I'm going to read to you the background and some of the details about it. Then there is a short 5-minute video, and we'll discuss after that. And then PJ will be able to give us his opinions on it, coming from where he understands things, because what's best for humanity is that we always find out where we can improve and where our weaknesses are. And I think right now our children are being subjected to a lot of things that they shouldn't. And this experiment may help us understand some of those things. Granted, it will get into some of the imperfections and criticisms about it as well. So all experiments are good when you have multiple sides expressing where its weaknesses are. But let's go ahead and get into it. The background of this questions: are aggression and violence learned behavior? In a famous and you guys can jump in anytime you want, that's fine. In a famous and influential experiment known as the Bobo doll experiment, Albert Bandura and his colleagues demonstrated one way that children learn aggression. Aggression lies at the root. Well, let me read this little blurb here quick. According to Bandura's social learning theory, learning occurs through observation and interaction with other people. Essentially, people learn by watching others and then imitating their actions. That's common sense for the most part. Aggression lies at the root of many social ills ranging from interpersonal violence to war. It is little wonder that the subject is one of the most studied topics within psychology. Social psychology is the subfield devoted to the study of human interactions and group behavior, and the scientists working in this field have proved much of their research on human aggression. The experiment involved exposing children to two different adult models, an aggressive model and a non-aggressive one. After witnessing the adult behavior, the children would then be placed in a room without the model and were observed to see if they would imitate the behaviors that they had witnessed earlier. Here's their predictions of what they expected to see. Boys would behave more aggressively than girls. Children who observed an adult acting aggressively would be likely to act aggressively even when the adult model was not present. Again, these are things that they expected to happen. Children would be more likely to imitate models of the same sex rather than models of the opposite sex. Children who observed the non-aggressive adult model would be less aggressive than the children who observed the aggressive model. The non-aggressive exposure would also be less aggressive than the control group. So those of you who know scientific studies and just basic stuff, they usually have the study group and then they have a control group. It usually involves a placebo or something to where it's doesn't have any real effect. It's just something you observe and compare it to something where they actually have something applied in the study. Methodology. The participants for the experiment, and this gets into some numbers, it's not that big of a deal. The participants were 36 boys, 36 girls enrolled at Stanford University Nursery School. The children ranged in age between 3 and almost 6, and the average participant age was 4 years, 4 months. There were a total of 8 experimental groups. One of these participants, 24, were assigned to a control group that would not be exposed to an adult model. The rest of the children were divided into 2 groups of 24 participants each. One of the experimental groups would be exposed to aggressive models, while the other 24 children would be exposed to the non-aggressive models. These groups were divided again into groups of boys and girls. Each of these subgroups were divided so that half of the participants would be exposed to same-sex adult models, while the other half were exposed to opposite-sex adult models. Before conducting the experiment, Bandura also assessed the children's existing levels of aggression. Groups were then matched equally so that they would have average levels of aggression. Here's the procedures. Each child was tested individually to ensure that the behavior would not be influenced by other children. The children were first brought into a playroom where they were in a number of different activities to explore. The experimenter then invited an adult model into the playroom and encouraged the model to sit at a table across the room from the child that had similar activities. Over a 10-minute period, the adult model began to play with the sets of Tinker toys. In the non-aggressive condition, the adult model played with the toys and ignored the Bobo doll for the entire period. In the aggressive model, however, the adult model would violently attack the Bobo doll. In quotes, the model laid the Bobo down on its side, sat on it, punched it repeatedly in the nose. The model then raised the Bobo doll, kicked it, or picked up a mallet, struck the doll in the head. Following the mallet aggression, the model tossed the doll up in the air aggressively and kicked it about the room. The sequence of physical aggression acts was repeated 3 times, interspersed with verbal aggressive responses. In addition to physical aggression, the adult models also used verbal aggression phrases such as kick him and pow. These models added 2 non-aggressive. The models also added 2 non-aggressive phrases. He sure is a tough fella, and he keeps coming back for more. After the 10-minute exposure to the adult model, each child was then taken to another room that contained a number of appealing toys, including a doll set, fire engines, airplanes. The children were permitted to play for a brief 2 minutes, then told that they were no longer allowed to play with any of these tempting toys. The purpose of this was to build up frustration levels among the young participants. Remember all these little details because they play an important outcome in the results. Finally, each child was taken to the last experimental room. This room contained a number of aggressive toys, including a mallet, a tether ball with a face painted on it, dart guns, and of course the Bobo doll. The room also included several non-aggressive toys. Toys included crayons, paper, dolls, plastic animals, and trucks. Each child was then allowed to play in the room for a period of 20 minutes. During this time, raters observed the child's behavior from behind a one-way mirror and judged each child's level of aggression. The results, 3 of the 4 that they predicted actually came about. Bandura and his colleagues had predicted that the children in the non-aggressive group would behave less aggressive than those in the control group. The results indicated that while the children of both genders in the non-aggressive group did tend to exhibit less aggression than the control group, boys who had observed an opposite sex model behave non-aggressively were more likely than those in the control group to engage in violence, which is interesting. Children exposed to violent model tended to imitate the exact behavior they had observed when the adult was no longer present. Researchers were correct in their prediction that the boys would behave more aggressively than the girls. Boys engaged in more than twice as many acts of physical aggression than the girls. There were important gender differences when it came to whether a same-sex or opposite-sex model was observed. The boys who observed adult models behaving violently were more influenced than those who had observed female models behaving aggressively. Interestingly, the experiment found in same-sex aggressive groups, boys were more likely to imitate physical acts of violence, while girls were more likely to imitate verbal aggression. There's an impact and follow-up, but let's skip that and we'll go right to the comments and criticisms. As with any experiment, the Bobo doll study is not without its criticisms. Acting violently towards a doll is a lot different than displaying aggression or violence against another human being in a real-world setting. Another one, because the experiment took place in a lab setting, some critics suggest that results observed in this type of location may not be indicative of what it takes in a place in the real world. It has also been suggested that children were not actually motivated to display aggression when they hit the Bobo doll. Instead, they may have simply been trying to please the adults. Since the data was collected immediately, it is also difficult to know what the long-term impact might have been. Some critics argue that the study itself was unethical by manipulating the children into behaving aggressively. They argue the experiments were essentially teaching the children to be aggressive. The study might also suffer from selection bias. All participants were drawn from a narrow pool of students who were the same racial or socioeconomic background. This makes a difference in generalizing the results to a larger and more diverse population. Before we see the video, either one of you had any comments on that?
Loki?
Oh, by all means, go ahead. I'll go after you.
I think some people might be wondering. Well, they're going to see the video now, but I think some people might be wondering of the logic in using the Bobo doll. And Adega and I were discussing it the other day, because it is kind of a punching bag, and it's kind of intuitively. I mean, children are very intuitive, and they see the function of a toy, right? But it should be noted that this experiment was basically replicated, pretty much replicated the same way, just using like teddy bears, if I'm not mistaken, right, Adega?
I don't know about teddy bears. That's a further study done later, but I don't know about that one.
Yeah, it was basically replicated with other toys that were not intuitively meant to be hit, like the Bobo doll. So
with the same results?
Pretty much the same, yeah.
Wow. Okay, that I didn't know.
I think this is interesting. I was raised very much as, well, if you're going to get angry and you're going to get upset about something, you have to channel that, and you have to channel it in some kind of positive way, not a negative way. Getting your emotions out instead of holding them in, letting them be released in a positive way is the way you're supposed to do things. I think this whole thing, even before we see the video, is an idea of, can you channel that kind of aggression into something and not have it be a destructive force? Have it be some kind of positive force, a positive way. Going and hitting a punching bag is a very healthy thing. You're not hitting someone. You're not hurting the punching bag. The punching bag's an object. You are channeling any kind of aggression or bad feelings or upset into the bag, which would be the Bobo doll in this instance. There's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. So let me load up the video and show the video.
This is very old and low quality, so.
The segment you're about to see is taken from an early experiment on learning of aggressive styles of behavior through modeling. Children watched a filmed adult perform novel aggressive acts toward a inflated doll, and the physical aggression was accompanied by novel hostile remarks. We later measured how much of this modeled aggression the children had learned just by watching. Now, the measurement of learning of aggression uses simulated targets rather than live ones. The model pummeled the doll with a mallet, flung it in the air, kicked it repeatedly, threw it down and beat it.
Kid's getting into it. He's like, bow, bow, yeah.
It was once widely believed that seeing others vent aggression would drain the viewer's aggressive drive. As you can see, exposure to aggressive modeling is hardly cathartic. Exposure to aggressive modeling increased attraction to guns, even though it was never modeled. Guns had less appeal to children who had no exposure to the aggressive modeling. The children also picked up the novel hostile language. The room contained varied play materials, and children could choose to play aggressively or non-aggressively. The children devised new ways of hitting the doll. Now, the object of interest was the novel aggressive acts, not punching the doll. And children in the control group who had no exposure to the aggressive modeling never exhibited the novel forms of aggression. And here's a creative embellishment. A doll becomes a weapon of assault.
The name of this girl is Amber Heard.
Right.
Sorry.
Got PJ busted up.
You know, I'm going to comment something about that later.
All right, that was it.
All right.
You know, actually, if I can comment on that right now, Loki, what you just said, it's interesting to see what some of the kids who were then like a lot of these experiments, you later have feedback from them as adults watching this. Like imagine Dave Bob in our audience is one of those kids, for example, and they usually say they were just having fun. That's usually their response.
Yeah.
Right. And my take on this, because this is exclusively talking about violence, but this is part of the reason why I enjoy having the panel in the audience, is I see this as being indicative of anything where there are certain communities now that are exposing children, whether in school or whether in front of adults that are doing various different acts, and how much of an impact that has on them. Like I was reading something, and I'm trying to do this without getting the channel in trouble, where a child's lifestyle, even to the point of therapy and surgical changes, have already been influenced into someone who's younger than 10, who decided when they were 4 that what they were born as is not who they are. And the parents are people who are very much convinced that they are not who they are, if you guys can understand what I'm saying. And again, with the Bobo experiment, this talks about aggression, but I'm actually not wondering, I'm hinting very strongly at that these influences that are non-wholesome have serious implications, especially when they're repeated over and over and over on a daily basis. What's your take?
Loki?
Okay, so take a kid that is put into a new environment, all right, and but he's also he's experienced like the Bobo doll, he's experienced punching bags, he or she, however you want to look at it. But this is a non-violent person. In fact, this person doesn't even have any kind of real physical any kind of physical altercation until many years later when they're in junior high. Why? When they've been around toy guns, they've been around punching bags, they've been around, let's say they're introduced to martial arts, boxing, whatever. Yet they don't have what you would really consider a physical altercation with another human being for years after that, and after excessive bullying, whatever you want to call it. Why did that not happen before then? Why isn't this kid like already running around with pistols and all kinds of stuff, terrorizing other children? If these kinds of things cause violent tendencies within kids, why didn't this just go completely off the edge way before this?
Well, I think probably. I mean, there's several things here. One is obviously context, and kids, kids know they're participating in some activity, and there's thresholds too. Like if you and like somebody like B.F. Skinner, who's the father of operant conditioning, would say, he used to say, if you give me a blank slate, I will turn that person into any kind of individual you want me to turn them into. And so there are thresholds of if this is prolonged enough, if what the children are exposed to, then they will integrate it into their personality instead of just being a passing behavior, right?
But is that also only from environment? Is there something in us that keeps us from acting out that way, or is it the environment? I mean, because you honestly, one of the strangest things I ever heard was that this kid that I'm talking about right now was tormented. He was tormented from grades 1 through 5. The kids, he had his pants thrown in the toilet. He was literally tortured almost every single day in school. But he went home and he had a good home life. His dad was a good guy. His mom was a good woman. He had a good home. But the environment at school was completely a different environment. And that kind of, he did not want to hurt anyone. And it wasn't really until this kid, and he was a boy, hit puberty and was like, no, I've had enough, that situation changed. Because he didn't want to hurt anybody. He never wanted to hurt anybody. But this kid had toy guns. He had toy swords. He had punching bags. He was in martial arts, all kinds of stuff, but never had that kind of experience until he hit junior high, where he had an actual physical altercation. And even then, that bothered him so bad that he was like in tears afterwards, because he felt like he did something he shouldn't have. Like it was a bad thing. Sticking up for himself was almost a bad thing, because he did not want to use violence to solve a problem.
Well, I mean, like you're saying, like his home life obviously taught him certain values, right? And
that was his refuge.
And and not only his refuge, but his like his building blocks. His home life is really his building blocks. So even though he's going through all this at school, if the building blocks are strong, then the child will suffer, but he won't like turn into Hitler.
I'm sure everyone here has known someone who has had abusive upbringing, and they swear up and down that when they become an adult, they will never be that. But then the alcoholic child, or child of an alcoholic, becomes an alcoholic themselves, or the child of an abuser becomes an abuser themselves, depending on the abuse, even though they swear up and down they won't be part of it. There are some that say that there's a genetic tie to that, or predisposition. There are others that say it's a learned behavior. It's a proposal that I'm putting in here because, like what you were saying, Loki, if the influence, the major influence, whether it be home life or friends or what have you, is the positive one, the outcome in the long run doesn't mean that they become nonviolent or non-abusive or non-self-destructive. It just means that they have the restraints to know when to be aggressive and when not to be. and how to function in a good society. At least that is my hypothesis.
Can I just mention real quick is just the fact that that we saw that video, just for everybody who's watching, like today, and I saw a question there about ethics too. Today, this might not be carried out the same way for various reasons. First of all, some people would say that the experiment is flawed, in that even though even though the results of the experiment are bringing to light innate truths, people would say that the Bobo doll, of course, is intuitively a target, and apart from that, also the Bobo doll itself, along with a tether ball in the experiment, are the only two interactive elements in the room. And because it's an interactive element, that means if you engage it, it responds to you, the tether ball and the doll. They're more likely to be engaged. So there's like a whole bunch of reasons why, and then the whole thing about probably teaching violence to kids might not be addressed quite the same way today. But fundamentally, what we were saying at the very beginning there, that's been replicated with something that's more intuitively innocent and intuitively cuddly, like a teddy bear, and the results are the same, basically.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I brought the whole thing, because we don't do these for very long, and we're already going longer than normal for my segment, is
this is pretty much the segment tonight.
Okay.
No,
all right.
This is take as much time as you want to dig. This is the segment tonight.
Well, I talked with PJ about this too, and again, he is the eternal optimist, the good man on the scene. I'm kind of like the realist, and but I try to be an optimist. Is that with so much that we see that makes us mad about what happening to children, it doesn't hurt to smile. It doesn't hurt to help. Or to do anything that will brighten their day, to give a positive influence to someone, to do your share to negate some of the things that are making you so mad. If there are negative influences, be twice as positive.
How much though of this is just kids being kids? I mean, we saw the older girl, she's kind of like, tapping it, and she wasn't really hitting it. She kind of pushed it a little bit. The other two kids though, they were beating the crap out of that. They were putting the gun up next to it. But those are kids being kids. You put them in a room, they have something to play with, they're going to play with it. Oh, what is this? Oh, well, you hit it. Okay, and they go over there and they hit it. Is that aggression, or is them just playing? Was that little boy, you have no idea what was going on in that little boy's head. Was he acting like that was like a robber and he was a cop? Was he playing cowboys and Indians with the Bobo doll? What was going on? And this is all context that you need. When you sit down and you talk, okay, what were you thinking about when you were playing with the Bobo ball? Oh, I thought it was an Indian and I was a cowboy. And that's just a kid being a kid. And that's what I was trying to bring up earlier. There's nothing inherently aggressive or toxic or any bullshit like that with a kid just being a kid and playing with something. And
as adults, he wrote Killer Clowns from Outer Space. No, I'm kidding.
He probably did. And the little girl went on to star in God, yes. Yeah, she went on to be Amber Heard and Aquaman. But how much of that is just a kid being a kid? I did all kinds of stuff. Someone mentioned earlier they use their Lincoln Logs for tunnels. I had tunnels all over the place with G.I. Joe war stuff and firecrackers, and man, I would like blow some crap up. You would think I was one of that little kid off a Toy Story, but I wasn't being mean. It was just like, how close can I get to it feeling like, oh, the G.I. Joes really are fighting Cobra? There wasn't anything inherently evil until my dad came home and saw it and was like, what the hell are you doing? You know how much that shit costs? And I was like, sorry. But I mean, there was nothing evil about it. It was just kids having fun. It was just kids having fun.
Well, I think the experiment was meant to be more than just playing with a toy, as much as it is learned behavior, learned aggression, learned violence. And my thoughts are learned deviance or perversions, or antisocial behavior, and how much of that is a learned behavior by environment. It's just a hypothesis. I don't see us drawing any conclusions. But part of the hypothesis is, if you're around children, and I know in my experience as a doctor and as a father, my biggest goal was to be a positive influence as a guide and a director into helping them see what a good adult is, and how a good life should be, and how to relate to other people on a cordial, proper, and welcoming manner. Again, not just aggression.
I think fundamentally, what this experiment shows is what they now call a vicarious learning, which basically means that you can teach anything just by having the subject observe it in others, and so yeah, so vicariously you can learn anything, you can teach anything vicariously by through the act of observation. And I mean, at the same time, so what Loki's saying, is it just kids having fun, or is it something inherently wrong? And it's both, right? It's like it's just the kid being the kid, and it's also the kid learning something. Now, is the kid ever going to get to a threshold in his life or different thresholds, I should say, where learned behavior, through observation, can get him to do aggressive stuff? And we're talking here about aggression, by the way, but I mean, vicarious learning can be anything. And one of the things that, what you were bringing up while you were talking before, Adega, one of the things that came to my mind was seeing kids exposed to these drag shows, these transvestite drag shows.
Yep.
And for example, like we've kind of the society has come to a moment here where they are where something that has traditionally not been okay is all of a sudden being okay, because you would not take a child to a strip club or to a cabaret, but you're going to bring a very similar environment into the classroom or the public library or whatever. Sorry, you were going to say something, Adega?
No, I was agreeing with you.
So I mean, anything can be conditioned, and anything can be see the how do I say this? What's the right word here? Anything can anything can be taught through like what we might call gateway behavior or gateway observations, where like so the subject or the child has seen enough of something to say, well, okay, well, that's okay. And obviously the intention, the ultimate intention of doing the ultimate intention of some of these individuals are very politically minded, is that all children should be accepted regardless of their gender whatever gender issues they might have, or whatever, or their gender identity. But ultimately you're exposing them to adult adult content, and which is the mistake, obviously.
Right. And I think too, the influences, if they are not presented with something that is shown to be more desirable, or whatever they are taught is the most desirable, whether it be good or bad, is what they are going to learn to desire. I know that the brain, I don't know, I'm pretty sure you've gotten into this too, PJ, but the brain is it's not a stagnant thing. It never has been. It is always pliable. It's always adapting, and it can always change. Where they say you're born with a brain like this, no, you're not, because it changes all the time. It rewires, it reworks, and unless there's some serious disease process where it's degenerating, the more you read, the more you experience, the more the brain adapts and changes. And when you put certain brains into certain experiences, so people see certain things, hear certain things, feel certain things over and over again, the brain will wire and adapt to match those set of circumstances. That's why we have masochists and sadists. Their brains have been rewired to find pleasure in pain, or people can find pleasure in being self-destructive in various other ways. And again, it goes with this study, and going along with Loki, Japan, they have yet to find anyone who has become violent through violent video games. They're just playing games. And when someone puts down the controller, they realize it was just a game. This isn't something that has real life implications, except I have heard one here in the United States, and this happened not too long ago, where a guy played a lot of flight video games, totally normal, and then one day he stole a plane. And he went nuts with it and decided to take himself out. He didn't want to hurt anybody, but he wanted to relive the video game, and he did something they thought the plane couldn't do. He did a barrel roll at 10 feet off the ground in one of these commercial airliners. It was one of the small double prop ones, but it seated like 80 people. And there was some F-15s that were flying by, and they said, "Wow, we don't understand how he did it, but he did it." So you never know, you know. I'm just saying the reason why I bring it up is we have dangers in the real world, and we have to be the answer to that. We have to double our efforts to be the positive in the world.
Yeah, what's interesting is that one of the reasons we have, and this is very clear for me, it's very clear. One of the reasons we have so much violence in the U.S. is because the thresholds are lower. Why are the thresholds lower? So because kids might be playing Doom at home, right? Or all these other video games with guns, or what is it? I forget the name of it. Anyway, violent video games, or supposedly violent video games. Why are they enacting certain things at schools, et cetera, or 4th of July or whatever it might be? The reason that that's happening is because the thresholds in the states are lower. Why are the thresholds lower? Because the lifestyle in the states is people are very independent. They move around a lot. The family cohesive, the safety net of a family is not as strong as it is in other countries. In another country, the person who is borderline, or in another country, the person who's kind of the weird guy in town, he's just the weird guy in town who everybody's friendly to and everybody loves and everybody looks out for. And here, they may be very isolated, and they may be very they're not getting the support that they need in our society. And I think that's one of the fundamental things that leads people to a lower threshold of aggression and violence.
There was a study that I was reading about when I was still in college. It was in the Journal of Medicine, and it had to do with a hearing that they were having about violence in video games. And the hearing was all about the fact that this person played violent video games. They played Grand Theft Auto. They played Mass Effect. They played this. They played that. It was all these different list of video games. That's what the hearing is about. They completely avoided the topic of the fact that this young man had been whipped with a bare electrical cord. His father had used an electrical cord with a frayed end and whipped him with this most of his young life. So I think it had started in junior high and gone up through high school until he left. These were almost daily beatings with an electrical cord. They completely left this out in the hearing that they were doing. But how many people do you know that would be receiving violence like this, try and channel that violence through something, and then one day that just doesn't work? It's an overload. It's an overload of aggression. It's an overload of anger. They're angry about their life. They're angry about how it happened. They're angry about whatever. They're angry about the fact that their dad used to kick the shit out of them, whatever it was. They've just had enough, and they cannot channel any of that in any kind of constructive way. So they go out and do something absolutely crazy. They go out and shoot up a mall, or they go and shoot up their school, or they just completely, they cannot function normally and cannot channel any of that aggression in any kind of positive way. And they just hold it in too long, and then they snap.
And there's another really important point right there, Loki, that the more isolated somebody is, the less options they have. The less, for example, if somebody like when you're doing negotiations with somebody who's on a crisis hotline with somebody who has suicidal tendencies, the first thing you need to make them aware of is of their options, because when somebody is suicidal, or suicidal or homicidal, they don't see options. And like they don't see that there's alternative ways out of their situation or the behavior or whatever. Well, anyway, I just wanted to just point out that options to alternative behavior is what's lacking when somebody turns that aggressive.
Moons of Madness. Yeah, he makes a good point. There's a lot of mental health issues that we miss nowadays too. It's the small things where we don't see it. You say the isolation, and as long as they're isolated and we don't see it, yeah. But if we can recognize it ahead of time.
There's another issue here with regards to video games that we usually don't address, and this is it was very you guys remember there's a Japanese cartoon that had that made all these kids have seizures like several years ago, 10 years ago maybe.
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Well, one of the problems that we have that is not very well addressed is that there are they do a lot of the video games, very developed video games, do a lot of and not just video games, but platforms like Twitter or Facebook or something. They will have studies. They know how to do light sequencing or certain kind of image and light sequencing that will make the platform or the video game experience more addictive. And that is another issue too, because what if you're what you're engaging with every day is, there's also an addictive component to that. That just drives isolation, and it drives you to the threshold, faster.
Right. We do have a super chat.
Indeed, I was waiting until PJ got done talking. DJ Ronnie G with $10 super chat. Thank you so very much. DJ Ronnie G says, tonight's topic reminds me of Sympathy for the Devil, an Orville audiobook voiced by Bruce Boxleitner, also available as a Kindle ebook. Might be worth checking out. I'd recommend it. Thank you so very much, DJ Ronnie G, for your $10 super chat, brother. You guys keep the fires burning bright here in Valhalla. And while I do not have an Orville skull, which, my God, why don't I have an Orville skull? I need one. We need no longer fear the banana. I do have something almost just as good, and it's the OG original skull.
A dollar? I've never seen a dollar. Nobody's got a dollar. Let us see the dollar. There it is. It's beautiful. Take your hat off, boy. That's a dollar bill.
Take your hat off, boy. That's a dollar bill.
I promised PJ, I said, yeah, we only go about a half hour. on these nights. I'm sorry to
And
keep
I
we're-
was
you over.
surprised that half hour we're gonna have this conversation in half an hour. I still want to see. I just want to make sure we get to the crux of what you're going after, Adega. Your concerns are, we'll see. Like your concerns about society conditioning young people or kids.
I'm concerned about it, but my biggest concern is what are we doing about it? When you see kids, when you deal with family members, when you're dealing with other people, what kind of positive influences can you do? I mean, we build nice communities. Orville Nation is nothing but good people. Valhalla is nothing but good people. But part of the human experience is being able to help others where you can. And the children, since they are the most vulnerable, should also be one of our major priorities. And any of you that are around them, have them in your homes, have them in your distant families, or even next door neighbors. I would challenge each, and I'm not preaching. I'm doing this for the benefit for myself, because we've talked about how, and you have to go back a couple of years for this one, but positive influences is contagious. And it also alters reality in a real way. There's the studies with how it affects the crystal formation of water. We talked about how things will degenerate at certain different paces, depending on whether the positive or negative influences. And I propose that with all the things that make you upset, do the things that would make other people happy.
You know what? Well, you know what's really good in like in regards to our kids or the youth. One thing that's really good, I think, is outdoor rural activities, like taking kids out to pick apples, um, you know, chop wood, hiking. Get them engaged in what life, truly is about on a more primal level. I think, and getting, especially disconnecting a little bit from technology, I think those are very healthy activities and you really, where you really see the effects of that is when you take inner city kids and you take them, on a 3 days out to to a rural area to do outdoor activities with, and you really see how that positively impacts them.
Right. Right, it really does. And and I know you know this too, with depression or various other mental illnesses similar. If the people would go out and walk in greenery every day for a half hour every day, just that alone changes things for the better. And for kids, physical activity outdoors and things like that, it's just incredible. Even for adults.
One of the healthiest things for males to do, believe it or not, and there's studies in neurology that have to do with this. One of the healthiest things to do is to have, and it sounds crazy, but within the first couple hours of being awake, to get natural sunlight and forward movement, to where you see for walking or running, where you see it's one of the healthiest things for your brain, where you have things passing you by, where you have your visual
Spatial
cortex.
motion.
Yeah, your visual cortex is engaged in what is forward movement, and for some reason, that in the early morning, or in the morning, is very, very positive and very healthy for neurotransmitters and your brain health in general, which also affects your mood.
Right. Well, I'm going to let you have the last word. I don't know about you, Loki, but this has been, I appreciate it, PJ, for coming here and helping us out and granting your expertise.
Oh, absolutely.
Sorry if I rambled.
No, you didn't at all.
That's
That's why I
you're
brought
here.
you here.
Yeah, that's why. Adega says that. Sorry if I talk too much. I'm like, oh my God, that's why you're here. You're here to talk too much. You're here to talk. That's what we're here for. I think you're absolutely right, but I also think that sometimes people's lives are so bogged down with everyday shit, especially when you've got parents working 2 jobs, you've got people out of the house all the time. Kids are taking care of siblings are taking care of nieces and nephews. It can get so crazy that even if you can take the time to sit down and watch a program with your kid and let your kid, sit next to you, you put your arm around your kid and you enjoy something together, you laugh, whether it's an episode of the Orville, whether it's whatever it is, a cartoon, that one little thing of showing your kid, yeah, you care and you're there with them and you're spending time with them, even that is so important and can make such a big difference. Whether it's your kid, whether it's your niece, your nephew, whatever. Go ahead, PJ.
You said something so important just now, because imagine you're a single mom and you're working or a single parent, whatever, and you're like up to here with work, and then there's school activities and this and that, and you're not really spending that much time with the kids. And what you brought something up really important. The time you have, make sure it's quality. That's the most important thing.
Yes. Absolutely. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. Thank you so very much, chat, for being here and hanging out with us over the last hour. Thank you, Adega, my co-host, for being here each and every Thursday. And PJ, thank you so very much for guesting, brother. It has been awesome to get to talk to you about this.
Thank you, Loki, Adega.
Oh, it's wonderful. I appreciate it very, very much.
It was a pleasure.
So, guys, we will be back tomorrow. We will be back tomorrow morning. I have no idea what we're going to get into, what kind of trouble we're going to get into. I think we're going to talk about Game of Thrones, but I'm not like 100% sure whether we're going to talk. I don't know. I think that's Monday. Never mind. That's Monday. Game of Thrones is Monday. Lord of the Rings is going to be Friday. So a week from tomorrow, we're going to do Lord of the Rings, Wangs of Power. That's right. That's Wangs of Power. Maria with T and Telly with $2 super chat. Great topic with the best panel. PJ talks a lot, and that's totally cool. That's why we wanted to get him over here.
She's just getting back at me because I call her channel instead of T and Telly at T and Talks a Lot. So.
Or cries a lot, depending on the day.
But yeah, we'll be back. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Until then, PJ, do you have anything you want to shout out? Anything you want to throw out before we get? I always almost get to the close. I'm like, be great. Wait. Hold on. Our guest, do you have anything you want to shout out? Anything you want to promote before we get out of here?
Yeah, our sister channel T and Telly has Cameron and Gil tomorrow talking UFOs, and that should be really interesting. A lot of people are concerned about renewal of the Orville. I just support the Orville as much as you can. I think it's going to come at some point. So
I want a season 4, or I want a movie. Period. I want a movie in the theater, or I want a season 4. I don't want any of this dicking around on Hulu stuff. I want a movie or another season. If you give me another season, fine, you can have it on Hulu. But if you give me a movie, I don't want no TV to Hulu movie. I want to see it in the damn theater. And bring Alara back, goddammit. I want her to open a jar of pickles for Ed. Jesus, how hard is that? Why couldn't he have done that? Why couldn't he have handed her a champagne bottle and been like, Alara, open this jar of pickles for me? I would have loved that. I would have laughed my ass off. We need more Alara. Bring Alara back. Anyway, guys, take care. Be excellent to each other. Always speak friend to enter, and we'll see you guys on the next 7 Kinds of Mischief.
Night, everyone.
Night.
These videos are tremendous. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hammer that notification bell.